welcome back. And moving on to our last segment for today. As we mentioned in the very beginning, we are talking about the sunken antiquities in Alexandria. And definitely this is one of the most important actually discoveries that took place to find out more about some antiquities that were over there thousands of years. But this time in particular, we're going to talk about the sunken antiquities that will be displayed next Thursday in the British Museum in England. Well, definitely this is something of great importance, as it is also promoting not only for the antiquities, but it is also promoting for all of Egypt. Today we have the pleasure to have with us Mr. Samir Abbass, Egyptologist. First of all, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, first of all, if you can tell us and give us your comments about this move that just Nashwa has noted about this museum.
Sure. I'm planning to talk about three different topics, and the first is the exhibit in UK and how important it is for Egypt, and just to make people feeling good is that's a temporary display, which is these 300 objects. They are in loans. They are not belongs to the UK. So after 6 months from now, they will return back to Egypt. So the second part, I will talk in general about the different sites of sunken antiquities of Egypt, and there is many of them. And the third part, if we have time, how we can get benefit from that for introducing Egypt and introducing Alexandria and other places where sunken antiquities exist in a good way to attract more tourists. So, talking about the conference, the exhibit in UK in the British Museum now, it is a unique exhibit, and that attracted the world attention already, because Egypt has some of the most important sunken antiquities all over the world.
Sorry to jump in here, sir, but don't you believe that it was more, if I can say, appropriate to be hosted here in Egypt rather than being hosted in the UK? I mean, that Egypt deserves to receive these revenues that will be received from such an exhibit.
I will give you an example of Tutankhamun collection, for example. Tutankhamun in the 1970s traveled around the world, and from my personal experience, because I take people, groups, and tours all over the country, those who are like 50 and 60 and over 60 years old, when you ask them why you made it to Egypt, why you decided to come and travel to Egypt, they will say that because when I was young, I was delighted to see the collection of Tutankhamun in our hometown or in our museums.
Yes.
So, which is, if it is a loan and there is all of the procedures has been made for the safety of the pieces, I think that will help. And that was proved by King Tutankhamun exhibits. And so I think that will help in attracting attention for people to visit Egypt, especially in that time. So myself, I'm very positive of having this display outside of Egypt, as long as it is a temporary display and as long as it is not unique pieces. For example, we cannot take something which is not, there is nothing like in Egypt, and take the risk of putting that outside.
Right. Let's talk more about the pieces that with which we are sharing in this museum, actually. Tell us more about the pieces that we have over there. By the way, so the revenues will be for Egypt, or?
So the kind of deal which is between the British Museum and the Egyptian governments, I have no idea about it, but I assume that definitely there will be some revenue. There is some revenue for the Egyptian governments and the Egyptian Antiquities Department in particular. And there is 300 pieces, 200 of them, they are taken from Egypt, which is, there is some collections in display, which is, they are a genuine collection. Sorry to use the word genuine, but they are already, they used to be already in display in the British Museum now. So the 200 pieces has been excavated mainly from the coastline, the Mediterranean coastline of Egypt, and especially in the last 15 years there was lots of excavations going on in Alexandria and in Canub, in Edco, and there is also in Heraclion, which is, that's most of these collections come from. I brought some maps, for the map, which is the illustration, the photo, which is now on the monitor, is about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And the reason I brought this one, because we are lucky to have 2 of the wonders of the ancient world, the ancient Lighthouse of Alexandria and the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid is the only one still standing until today. Nothing is standing from the 7 wonders. The ancient Lighthouse of Alexandria lies under the water. That's part of the sunken antiquities, and that used to be standing in Alexandria. That was 120-meter height. That was built nearly 2,300 years ago. That was like a skyscraper, but that was built 2,300 years ago. So there is more than 2,400 blocks of stones remaining, huge blocks, from the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria. They are around the fort of Qaid Bay in the eastern harbor now, and they are all like classified and has been documented. Not only there is sphinxes and statues as well. You know, if we can like show some other photos, there is some other artifacts as well, which has been found under the water, and among them there is a colossus of big statues of the Ptolemy's kings, which is built the lighthouse, the sphinxes as well, that in the same area. So what I'm thinking when it comes to the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria, what I'm thinking is rebuilding the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria, not could be in its original location, but that will be destroying the fort or next to the fort. That will bring a great attention, and we have everything. We have the blocks. We can take the blocks out of the water. Of course, they are not all of the blocks which is used to build the lighthouse, but we can add some new materials to get it standing as it used to be. And there is some photos as well showing how the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria looks like. And it will, if you are familiar with the new library of Alexandria, and the project is the revival of the ancient library of Alexandria. You cannot imagine how much the new library attracted the attention to Alexandria and to Egypt in general. So this photo is really amazing one, which is showing a satellite image of the eastern harbor. That is the historical harbor of ancient Alexandria. This harbor was the main harbor of Egypt nearly 2,300 years ago, and for nearly 1,000 years. So there is some lights on shore, and there is a lights under the water. In the lights under the water, and there are some buildings under the water. That's all that's sunken antiquities. I have my personal experience, and I have a diving course, and the first diving course I received that was in a club in the eastern harbor in Alexandria. And I remember very well the instructor, which is the diving instructor. He was telling me that when he used to dive, he was quite old in that time, in his 70s. He said, I used to see big churches under the water surrounded by the nets of the fishermen. So first of all, they are not churches, but they are Greek and Roman buildings modeled, and the churches now is built like it. That was his impression, and which is mean that the sunken antiquities of Egypt, of Alexandria, is already known from a long time. It is as early as 1910. That's when there was a French engineering was entrusted by Muhammad Ali family to make extensions in the platforms of the western harbor of Alexandria. And he discovered some of the sunken antiquities in 1920 or 1933. That was a British Air Force pilot. He reported that he'd seen sunken antiquities when the sea was like clear, when he was flying over Egypt, and he reported to Tosun, Omar Tosun, and he was one of the Muhammad Ali family, and he was an archaeologist as well, and he was the first one from Egypt to bring light to that. And then in 1960, which is Saadat, which is an Egyptian diver, he made the first maps of the sunken antiquities in the eastern harbor and the western harbor. And following that, the French expedition and the French Navy as well, they have a great interest in excavating and fishing out the Low Orient. Low Orient is a ship of Napoleon here in Egypt. And finally, there was a French archaeologist working until very recent.
Well, definitely have some very, very important pieces. Well, because, we always say that the museums are the best place to learn more about the culture and history. And I believe we have an underwater museum, definitely. And I'm very much surprised that you mentioned in the beginning that we don't have a lot of people who are aware of this or who go for diving in this area. So, and I think that's why we are having this talk today, to get people aware of the sunken antiquities of Egypt, which is a very important collection. And we have some small displays, like there is one in the Roman amphitheater in Alexandria, and there is a very humble display, and amongst the collection there is a small obelisk from city, the first. Any other place in the world has such an advantage or something? Not like an ancient antiquities, not as much as Egypt has. No, we have an advantage when it comes to that. No, I mean the idea itself, diving to enjoy something like this. So, there is, as far as I know, there is like 2 or 3 diving centers based in Alexandria, and they hardly get any actually customers, which is interest to dive to see the monuments, which is, I think that's something which is also we can try to promote.
which is diving tours. You know, there is lots of, you cannot imagine how many tours.
Maybe we are not promoting enough.
So you cannot imagine how many diving tours has been promoted in the Red Sea when there was enough tourists going to the Red Sea for diving on wrecks, which is ships sunken that could be like 50, 40 years old. And the number of people diving there, it could be like 100 times more than the number of people which is diving to see an ancient buildings dates back to over 2,000 years ago. So in the Eastern Harbor we have an island, has a palace, a small palace of Cleopatra there, which that sells very well, which is and unfortunately there is more people diving on wrecks in the Red Sea than there. So there is a good idea, which is I wish we can work on it, having underwater museum. Antiquities underwater museum.
I think this tells us more about.
That's one of the very famous important tablets, which has been fished out from the harbor, but that by the cooperation between a French archaeologist and Egyptian archaeologist.
Which piece is it?
So this is a tablet. A tablet is like a news piece from the ancient Egyptian time, and that's how they used to publish their news. They put these tablets erected by temples so people they can read and understand what's happening. And there is also some other photos of important artifacts under the water and fished out from the harbor. You know, if we will carry on showing some of the other photos. By the way, you know, there is some of these antiques that was about to be destroyed, you know, by some new buildings made by the Egyptian Navy, and that's when the Egyptian Antiquities Department and the French archaeologists managed to rescue that.
This is the piece you're talking about. We're going to see it right now.
No problem. So, I was talking about the underwater museum. And this one is one of the valuable, most important masterpieces fished from the harbor. This statue, 2,200 years ago, used to be standing on the door of the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria.
It's in a very good
The statue is made from granite, and that is for the King Ptolemy. And now this statue is displayed in a very proper location by the new library of Alexandria. You know, anybody who can visit the library, the statue will be in this place there. There is some other photos of already existing monuments under the water now, you know, if we will see them.
It is amazing, this one, because I can see it is in a very good shape.
In good condition, you know, but it's
just being under the water for all these years.
It's made out of granite, and granite is a very solid material, and that's why it survived.
This is another one. This is the Sphinx, I believe, or what's this? You can see, because I can see it a little bit earlier. Okay.
So I was talking about the project of the underwater museum, and I think that will be a unique museum. It will attract lots of people from all over the world. Having these pieces in display in their original location, but just cleaned up and being photographed, and putting them in display under the Eastern Harbor, which is the historical harbor, and not allowing that only not for divers. By the way, you don't need to be a professional diver to do that. It is only 6 to 10 meters under the water, which is not like a serious depth.
Not deep.
Not a serious depth. Second, we can make some glass tubes. Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. A Sphinx under the water in the Eastern Harbor. And I remember nearly 15 years ago, or before 15 years ago, the government of Alexandria used to use the Eastern Harbor as a sewer, unfortunately, and they stopped doing that. And back in that old time, there was no way to see because there was no transparency in the water. But now, you know, after they stopped using the Eastern Harbor as a sewer, now people can dive and see in these valuable monuments. So the underwater museum I'm talking about is also could have a glass domes under the water to protect these pieces, and so people they can just dive and see it.
So do you believe that this is expensive to do so?
Definitely, yes. You know, but on the other hand, there is lots of ways for financing such a project, and there is lots of I will not say
UNESCO, for instance.
Exactly, UNESCO, and not even UNESCO, some private organizations.
I believe they played a great role in changing what happened because of the Great Dam.
Exactly, and that's some of the sunken antiquities, by the way, is by Lake Nasser. If Abu Simbel temples not being saved, it will be part of the sunken antiquities, and not all of the Nubian temples along Lake Nasser, which has been saved by UNESCO project, and not all of them has been saved because they were racing with time, and some of them are still under the water until now. So, but the problem with Lake Nasser and the problem with the Nile River in general is the silting. So the Nile River brings lots of silt every year, and these monuments has been silted over. And that will lead us to another very interesting subject. Sunken Antiquities is not only in the Mediterranean Sea, in the Nile River as well. So how the ancient Egyptian people used to transport their valuable work of art in portions of the Nile. So today, accidents happening. Do you think that back in the ancient time there was no accidents happens, and there is some of these valuable coffins and statues sunken in the water in the Nile River? So not only how the ancient Egyptian people used to take the funeral and the mummified body and the treasures as well, how it used to be transported from their cities to the cemetery on the Nile River. And they were doing that for more than 3,000 years, which is mean that there is a high possibilities of there is underwater treasures in the Nile River. Golden artifacts is still untouched there, but it is more sophisticated to excavate there.
Yes, I'm afraid we have to end it here, but we really do appreciate your insight. Mr. Samir Abbass, Egyptologist, thank you so much for being with us on The Breakfast Show.
I'm very delighted to be with you as well.